Now on to our first session for the day, Cloud Summit. I think at this point, we can all agree that cloud is very real and an increasingly important part of the enterprise communications and collaboration strategy. But the question is, how really ready is cloud to meet its full potential? I mean, yesterday on this stage, we heard from a couple of folks in our enterprise summit that they had thought the answer was very ready. They'd put some communications capabilities out into the cloud, but then they ended up pulling some of them back. So really, what is the state of cloud today? Is it ready for our enterprise communications and collaboration? Where is it falling short? Where is it excelling? Let's bring out our panel, and we can begin the discussion on that. With me today is Enzo Signore, with the CMO of 8x8. You can take the second seat. Carl Baptiste, with Senior Vice President of Unified Communications and Enterprise Solutions with GenBand. Morning, Carl. Yes, right next to Enzo. Jeff Platone, Chief Marketing Officer with Interactive Intelligence.
Morning.
Jeff. Andrew Sinclair, who's the GM of Skype Product Marketing with Microsoft. Aaron Shepler, who's Platform Solutions Director with ShoreTel. Manev Khurana with Twilio. He's Vice President of Product Marketing.
Hi, Pat. Thanks for having us.
Frank Chacon with Verizon, Executive Director. And my co-moderator, Zias Karavala, good friend of Enterprise Connect and No Jitter, and a very prolific tweeter.
Come on, a little more.
So, gentlemen, obviously cloud is important. We can all agree on that. I mean, it is the wave of the future, if not for absolutely everybody, for a good majority of enterprises. We'll put something out in the cloud in terms of communications. But let's start with a look at your views on where we're headed with, you can do cloud in many different ways, but let's take a look at software as a service and platform as a service. We can just kind of go one by one and share your thoughts on where we are going in the future with each of those.
Sure, maybe I can start. By the way, the fact you're recognizing that cloud is here, it's a great statement. Only a couple of years ago, people were thinking about whether cloud was ready for enterprise communications. And we're seeing on a day-to-day basis, actually, we're seeing a huge acceleration of demand from mid-market and enterprise customers that are now moving to cloud communication with both feet into the cloud communication solution. They don't go through hybrid. They want to go straight from a PBX solution, on-prem solution, straight to the cloud communication solution. There are many things that need to happen. So I think the industry has evolved a lot in the last couple of years. There are a number of areas where we need to see further innovation to truly make sure that the majority of the customers are going to embrace this. The first has to be on the user experience. Today, even multiple vendors still have a very clunky user experience specifically on the mobile devices. That has to change. We need to truly have seamless experience, so with one touch of your finger, you can now go from any modality to another one, from voice to instant messaging to chat to meetings, video, all at the touch of your finger on a mobile device. Second, most of the enterprises are looking at cloud as a way to simplify the network, the way to bring agility into their infrastructure, as a way to reduce cost. And more often than not, as they're making the transition for a PBX, so for the voice services, they're also looking at contact center at the same time. So for instance, at 8x8, over 70% of our top customers are deploying both the contact center solution and the telephony solution at the same time. So major transition on the contact center.
Okay, so let's hold it there, and let's give somebody else a chance to talk here. Carl?
So I think we see similar trends, and for the first time last year, we started to see a trend of larger enterprises, mid and then to large, starting to come and release RFPs for cloud services. And so I think the trend upward is a good one. It means a broader spectrum of the enterprises looking to go to cloud for all the same reasons that were just mentioned. And I think that comes along with some kind of obvious trends in what will happen. So certainly, we were talking backstage about where is UCaaS, right, and how does that, has it reached its potential or not? I think what we see is a large percentage of the demand that we see is associated with how you serve your customer, right? So certainly contact center is playing a big role at pulling this out, but not just contact center in a traditional sense, platform as a service to introduce new ways that you can work within business applications and flow to and from the customer in a more seamless manner, right? So we're seeing a lot of that platform as a service demand for how you serve the customer as we go into this. And I think a little bit different than API, we're seeing, when we get to the large enterprise, we are seeing demand for hybrid. We're seeing demand where companies that have issued larger RFPs are looking for ways that they can simplify, meaning how can they achieve some type of integration with their existing on-prem systems with the cloud and do it in a seamless way. So platform as a service as a way to integrate better across an entire enterprise, I think is becoming a trend that we're seeing, or the demand for it at least.
Okay. Jeff?
Yeah, I'll try to answer your question specifically around, I think there's a lot of confusion around platform as a service and software as a service. And you look under the skirt of a lot of clouds, and you could probably change the word cloud and put hosted, frankly. And let me just be a little bit more specific. On the platform as a service, I think there's really a couple of leaders out there. Amazon's clearly far and away well beyond anybody else's capability because they've moved up the application stack. And those application software as a service vendors that have really embraced that new modern cloud 2.0 architecture, LinkedIn, Netflix, Uber, are really gaining the benefits of increased reliability, scalability, and a big increase in security. And so I think that game is right now Amazon's to really lose, and there's very few challengers out there. And I bring that up because we had a Cloud 1.0 offer as well, and realized we were not the best at DevOps and managing the platform. What we were good at is building real-time communications, and we looked at those super high scalable, reliable apps like LinkedIn and Netflix and adopted that microservice architecture versus a monolithic architecture that is really fraught to failure. And I think that's really what slowed the adoption of real-time communications from the cloud, because everybody was using old cloud technology and it wasn't as reliable on real time. And so that's really, when you look underneath the covers, there's a big difference when people say cloud, and there's a big difference between which platform they use and what architecture they use, because it manifests itself in a better experience, higher quality, and certainly higher security.
Okay. Andrew, you might have something to say about AWS being the platform of...
Best friends. We're best friends. Seattle's a very hospitable place. So it's interesting. I was here 6 years ago, actually representing Skype before we were part of Microsoft, on a very similar panel. And I was asked, should we be concerned or should we be thinking about the cloud? And we had a lot of answers around private cloud and hosting VMs and all this sort of stuff. And I gave a very simple answer. The cloud happened. Let's move on. Well, today, it's SaaS that happened. Of course, and to build on your point, of course, you can run a couple of VMs or you can have somebody host your Cisco PBX in the cloud, because all you really did was move the CapEx and the management into the cloud.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you want to really start to take advantage of hyperscale, take advantage of somebody else managing your huge hidden cost, which is really security and building trust and compliance and all that in the cloud, then you really need to move to a SaaS provider, and you really need to move to a solution that is integrating more than just one stack, more than just a PBX, more than just storage, more than just name your favorite on-premises service and put it in the cloud. And as soon as you start integrating these, then you get to take advantage of, firstly, you obviously get hyperscale. Secondly, you obviously get all the trust capabilities. But you also start to be able to build on top of that. And in our case, we talk an awful lot about building intelligence on top of the cloud, being able to take advantage of all that data that you have there and start to learn from it. And I'm not talking about, having us use your data to sell advertising to you. That's not what we do. It's
Machine learning, right?
Yeah, it's machine learning. It's building, we talk an awful lot about translation, we talk an awful lot about transcription, we talk an awful lot about business intelligence built on the cloud. So I believe is what you're going to start to see, and it's already out there, but you'll see massive adoption, is around SaaS and building a full collaboration stack with intelligence, with security in the cloud.
It's really using platforms like yours and Amazon's as part of your OS.
Exactly. It is the Meta OS sitting in the cloud. Yeah.
Sure. Well, I'll just add to the earlier sentiments with regard to what we're seeing for the future, and I think that's a lot less apprehension from businesses and enterprises to move to the cloud. And what they're really looking for is more customization, right? How do we, you see preference panes that have A, B, and C. I need option D, right? And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, maybe to echo the earlier sentiment of kind of that streamlined user experience, because the providers today just are kind of all over the board. Certain areas, mobility, it's kind of segregated out in certain areas, so that's what we're seeing.
Great. Let me take, Andrew, your point about the communication and collaboration stack and answer the question that way. So Twilio invented the cloud communications API category. We, just like Amazon provides cloud building blocks for compute and storage, and Google for maps, Twilio provides cloud building blocks for communications. Over 700,000 developers that work for companies like yourselves use Twilio today to take those building blocks and augment their on-prem or their existing communications environment. And when we look at what they're doing across the communication stack, we're seeing different things happen. So let's break the communication stack into the interface, the integration, and the infrastructure. Interface is how people, their end users, are using the communication. There we are seeing mobile apps and websites replace the 800 number that you give your customers to call you. We are seeing the chat interface, the dialer, the conference line become embedded inside business software that people are already using. That's how the interface is changing. On the integration front, it's all about context. In the past, we've all, as technologists, tend to ship our IT organization chart to our customers. That's why we get emails from do-not-reply@bigbrand.com. Or, we are in these amazing multi-million-dollar mobile app experiences where we have a lot of information about what we are doing, and then we switch out to the IVR into the call center, and the person picks up the phone, has no idea of all the information that the business already has about us in their CRM, because they're two different departments. Now, with communications APIs, information and communications are coming into one interface. And that's huge. And then that brings me to infrastructure. The job of the infrastructure is to get out of your way. With the cloud, you can focus your energy, your mental space on building better interfaces and better integration and not operate the infrastructure, let somebody else do it. And that's what we are seeing our customers do today, innovation across those three layers.
Yeah, so at the risk of sounding repetitive as going down the row here, right? I think I would agree with most.
It's a long line of folks.
Yeah, but I'll try to add a little different view to it. So first of all, the question was around hybrid versus SaaS and all that. So the reality is it depends where you are from a risk perspective and where you are within your continuum of what you have in place. So we have customers that may have a particular portion of their UC that needs to be swapped out, and we'll address that with one portion of it and eventually migrate them over time. So I view hybrid solutions as a ends to a mean, if you will. But on the other side, we have customers that need a whole business transformation, right? And they'll look for the cloud and the things that we do on a global nature to get them to do that. We have some great use cases around healthcare with visiting nurse services where they're looking at how do I change the experience around patient care, right? So I'll use that as a trigger point to what Manat just spoke about. Because when you think about using collaboration tools, all of us grew up in an area, and our children grew up in an area where this is the only device that they use, right? So to your point, more and more of the collaboration tools are being moved to these devices. So what we're trying to do is use the most personal device that we all carry as the way in which we collaborate. So we're trying to move more and more applications to integrate with these mobile devices. So things like mobile apps, things that originate within the cloud. So when you look at deploying technology, right, we focus too much on the technology and not enough on the user experience and the business process innovation. So what's made Twilio so hot is that they've turned that on its head, and we can now look at business process and actually impact the business more importantly. That's why, you know, Cisco bought Tropo and why you guys are doing so well, because when you look at the continuation of collaboration, the next great thing will be, how do I enable my business and make them more competitive? And that's a great way to
At
do
the
that.
interface and the integration levels.
That's exactly right.
I thought Manav and his red jacket made Twilio so hot, but maybe it's more than that.
I like that answer.
Yeah. You know, so if you're right, and the mobile device is the thing that's driving us to the cloud, is UCaaS really not just a stopgap on the way to true CPaaS, to platform as a service? Because ultimately, I think one of the problems that cloud UC has, and I'm worried we're going to repeat the sins of the past, where everybody's got their own siloed platform. So if I'm a customer and I'm using 8x8, and then I buy a company that's using Verizon, provisioning separate, and you know, these are all separate islands of connectivity. But ultimately, maybe the users don't want to use multiple platforms. Maybe they just want more functions in the stuff they already use, right? So isn't the evolution of cloud UC to move away from traditional UC, if we even have such a thing, but more to be a set of functions that we build into our mobile apps and things, so we're not flip-flopping around?
Well,
I know you'd say yes.
For sure. I mean, there are many examples where, I mean, think about United Airlines. You know, I use United a lot. I fly in and out of San Francisco all the time. And they have really built an amazing mobile app experience that gives me everything I want.
Could be better.
Except when I'm trying to reach somebody at United. Right? I have all my information there, then I have to go 3 screens over to the very bottom. There's a contact us option. I tap a number, and I get kicked out. And somebody on the other end picks up and goes, "Hi, this is United. What's your mother's dog's maiden name, and what's your mileage plus number?" I'm like, come on, you have all that information right there. Right? And that's what communications embedded with information can do.
So we actually have, it's interesting you say that, we actually have a demo at our booth, ironically. We didn't set this up. But one of the things we're trying to do is actually, if you look at embedding these applications in the mobile network, right? So you can see this actually happen at an Airlines demo. So what we can do now in these, with these mobile apps is we know where the customer's calling, right? So we can intercept that call in our network, right? And put up a visual IVR. And start to interact with that customer on their mobile device, which is, by the way, the preference in most places, right? Because when you think about apps, you need to do a lot of advertising to drive people to your apps on your phone. There are 12,000 apps that are built every day, right? So how do you do that? Well, if you intercept the call, yeah, that's it. So what you do then is, even if that call goes to that agent, you continue to have that dialogue through the mobile connection as well. So now you have a voice call as well as all of the data that was passed. And if there's information that needs to be pushed, you can actually operate in a mobile.
Well, and that's the
way.
point, right? If you don't use intelligence that you're gathering from the interaction, and you know, the other point I'd make, Zeus, is that the whole notion of separate collaboration, communication, and engagement applications, that will go away, right? It really should be integrated because of the experiences, you know, the last couple of folks just talked about. And the real value is in delivering a better experience, but by doing that, by gathering better intelligence, the rules and policies that you put in place that really take that whole customer journey along, so that whether it's a member, a customer, or a citizen, you end up having a better experience. From the vendor side, that's hard to do because most of the people up here have a bunch of applications that are not integrated. And so in many cases, you're going to have to rewrite that to a new, more modern cloud architecture before you can deliver a better experience. And so, you know, that's why I say I think there's a lot of confusion where everybody will raise their hand and say, yeah, I've got cloud apps, and most of them, as I said, are just hosted monolithic client-server applications that they had from the past.
Yeah, in fact, I think we've
back
made
to
the
your-
environment more complicated for customers.
That's right.
That's right.
And Enzo, you mentioned simplification, but it's not. I think for a small business, you can standardize on a service like yours, and be done with it and use it. But if you're any size of scale at all, I think standardizing on one vendor is very difficult, especially if you're global. And then all of a sudden, as an IT person, all the administrative tasks I have to do are multiplied, right?
Well, you still
Let
have
me give you some example, actually. The NetSuite, they started actually the on-prem solution, traditional on-prem solution, and they had, Shortel, Cisco, RingCentral, the solutions. It was too complex for them to stay with the current status quo. So actually they decided to simplify the network on a global basis, and they decided to go with a single service that can span now the globe. 7,000 people company that had a manufacturing company, came through the acquisition of a merger of two major manufacturing companies. 7,000 employees are standardizing on one single service. Regis, 3,000 business centers around the world that are standardized on one single service. The value of simplicity, the value of standardization across all of the locations, it's a massive value for enterprise.
Yeah, so let me guess, they're 8x8 customers? But the issue with that, though, is, and you can do that. So I remember B of A telling me that they were standardizing on Cisco back in the IPPBX days. But eventually what happens is you acquire another company,
Right.
and they're not standardized on that
That's right.
platform, and you got to figure a way to integrate it in, right? And so it's a great utopian vision to try and standardize on a single vendor. And again, small business, have at it, right?
But you're missing the point.
Yeah.
You're really missing the point that there is cloud-to-cloud integration possibilities. Once you move to a modern architecture, we could just as easily work with Twilio or Microsoft because of the way the application was architected, because there's open APIs. And so there's plenty of choice.
But you guys don't.
Yeah,
Of course we do.
I'm with Zeus on this, though.
But that's misinformation.
Well,
And
the fundamental.
Be honest to the crowd here that once you establish open APIs, of course you have cloud-to-cloud integration, and there's plenty of choice in terms of which zip trunk you want to use, which application you want to present to a customer, how you want to manage the rules from the back end. There's of course a lot of choice there. And to your point,
The fundamental premise I think Zeus is saying is, why create more silos and then spend the time on creating integration? Why not start with integration? Everybody, unless you're a greenfield environment, has communications infrastructure and solutions. Right?
Exactly.
And if you want to add new capabilities, using cloud building blocks to add those new capabilities, and you just do the integration, is one approach. Buying another system and doing a flash cut migration to it, of course, simplicity is a great outcome. But making the flash cut migration to it is painful. And avoid that pain because you'll have to do integration later anyway. Go straight to integration. That's the point, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly
There
the
are
point.
2 points hidden in that, though. One is, at what point are you integrating? We're not talking about moving from network to TCP/IP. That's what it used to be, and then it was move from this PBX to that PBX. Companies like American Airlines or Bank of America, they're not interested in this low-level technology that they're trying to integrate. They're more interested in integrating their business processes.
Exactly.
And it's our role to take all of that complexity out of it, because they don't care. We talk about do they, how do they hook this app up to that app? We should do that for them. Allow them to focus on their line of business. Allow them to focus on where their real IP and where their real customer service is, and get them out of this space.
No question about it. I think
exactly
the issue.
why
I think the issue is, sorry, just one comment here. The issue is that each vendor solution comes with an opinion of what those rules and what those policies should be and how the business workflow should be organized.
And even what you want to integrate, right?
What's that?
And even what you want to integrate.
And what you want to integrate, right? That's the issue. You're right. Enterprises should spend their time creating business workflows, but why force an opinion on how each system's going to work?
Exactly.
That's where the problem is.
well, because experience matters. And that's the real differentiation of an application from vendor A versus vendor B is what experience are you delivering to your customer or member or citizen? That's the difference. And that's what matters at the end of the day.
This is why I'm baffled why the conversation is around Spark or around even Skype for Business, right? Zeus is exactly right. The trend is not going to be that you go into some UC environment and just stay there, right? I mean, we're all enabling capabilities to actually coexist and extend business applications, right? So the important future here, and I think the clear future in the near term, is exactly that. Open frameworks that allow you to bring functions into the process and the business workflow, or into the service of a customer. I mean, that's clearly the direction that we need to go.
And the
And
business
that's what you should look
workflow-
for as a customer.
The business workflow is absolutely the right thing to think about it, because we're talking about UC as a horizontal application, right? But if you want to truly make a difference and drive business value, we need to look at the business users. So who are they? Salespeople, people in finance, people in the help desk, people in a contact center. They live and breathe into a number of business applications that need to be augmented with enterprise communications. And it's not just integration with Salesforce or Zendesk or NetSuite. It's about adding analytics. So now I can actually do intelligent things. For instance, if in a sales organization, I can see how many calls are coming in. I can decide if my guys are actually calling people that are supposed to be closing business in the next 30 days, as opposed to calling people that are far away in the funnel. So actually can use communications as a way to improve the productivity, but it has to be coming with a high level of integration with the business application, not necessarily with APIs, but with business application.
Yeah,
business
You're
user
absolutely
interface.
right. It's
I
the
couldn't-
business application that's the important thing, not low level, which is why you're seeing companies like Salesforce and Microsoft working closely together, why we're working closely together, because it's the right level. You're integrating at the business process, not at the TCP socket.
Right.
And you really need to get people, or companies really asking us to be able to get access to the data, and they're asking for access to intelligent information. They don't want data silos. They want APIs that allow them to analyze across their data silos and view it as a data asset.
That's right.
Right, and they don't want to install more hardware and software, that's for sure. They want it to be able to just appear within a business process experience, and that's why integration does matter.
And in fact, because of that, Jeff, the one question that I hate getting is when people ask, what's your cloud strategy?
Right.
Because we shouldn't be asking that, right? You should be thinking about what your omni-channel customer contact center strategy is.
Exactly.
And then you figure out how to build that, and you probably pull assets from the cloud. It reminds me a lot of the early days of the internet. We used to have whole conferences on the internet.
Right.
We don't have conferences on the internet now because it's just embedded in the fabric of what we do. And I think the cloud has many strengths, right? It's, it's
Well, but
on
it's-
demand, it's
but this
agile,
is where people
But
get-
it's got to become integrated in the fabric of what we do.
But this is where people get confused when you get 8 people up here and everybody says, yeah, I'm in the cloud.
But let me ask you a question. Do you think end users really care?
The user doesn't care.
That's my
Right?
point.
They just want to use the app.
No one had to teach my son how to use Google Hangouts.
No, but you can't, the point of that is you can't deliver a better experience
doesn't care if it's
appearing
cloud.
in workflow if you don't have the right architecture and design and strategy, and that's been proven, right? Cloud 1.0 is the past, and Cloud 2.0 is the future, and there's plenty of examples out there in terms of scale and security and reliability that you just can't achieve with those prior architectures, and that's why strategy does matter.
Yeah, and nor do you actually want to try and achieve it with those architectures, because you want us, frankly, to take care of scale, security,
Absolutely. Right.
intelligence on top of that. That's the old
And that's
model. No, Bank of America does not want to manage hyperscale across data centers around the world. They do not want to be buying millions of miles of fiber to connect those together. That's our job.
Yeah, for
They
sure.
want to focus on actual delivering value.
Right,
to
you
their
and
customers.
AWS are going to commoditize, networking and storage and compute, auto scaling, and that's why I said you're moving up the app stack, right? Which is great for us because we can focus on delivering valuable services that can really make a difference in a business outcome.
So
Exactly.
so we have to figure this out, though, right? Because I talk to a lot of CIOs and companies all the time, and the frustration that they have is that their end users are just going out and just downloading different collaboration apps on their own, and that's detrimental to a company because then what you have is islands of communication starting to happen, and the way you drive innovation across a company is tearing down barriers between business units. So that's why more and more IT spend is being moved out to CMOs and other places. Gartner had a comment in a recent stat that said by 2017, more of the IT spend will be influenced by the CMO than the CIO, right? So how do we get in front of that? And that's, again, creating platforms that are secure, reliable, scalable, right, that allow for this kind of communication to happen.
I mean, I agree with you. Another thing to think about here is cloud is like eating healthy and working out. Of course you should do it. Right? But that doesn't mean I'm going to overnight shift to running a marathon and eating salad only. I'm probably going to get hurt. Right? The key thing to figure out is what is it the user experience, the interface, the integration that people need, and use the cloud selectively as building blocks or application, whatever it is, to create that experience. I agree, TCP socket layer, I don't even know what that fits in. Right? And in fact, I would be beware of the fact that the only one who benefits from you shifting overnight and doing a flash cut migration to the cloud is your vendor. It's going to be very, very hard for you to do that. Instead, take a hybrid approach, use cloud selectively, own your roadmap, and add that interface and integration that's necessary.
I would
that's
say
a
don't
good point.
overemphasize the technology.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not just about the technology. It's about the culture, your collaboration that exists within your company, and the business process.
Well, it's about the business outcome. I mean,
Right.
I think, you know, Andrew said it, and I think it's been said a couple of times, the technology really doesn't matter, right? It's what you can deliver in terms of a business outcome. And that's really, you know, honestly, what most of these people care about is how can I deliver a better customer experience? How can I cross-sell, upsell better? How can I answer their question, serve them better? And that's really the primary aspect of what the application
The
should be.
technology does matter, though. If the technology locks you in to a particular vendor
Has
and
to work.
solution, you cannot achieve what we're talking about here. You
No,
cannot.
we were talking about like compute, networking technology, commoditization
The
of,
commodities, right.
of the low-layer infrastructure. That no longer matters because, you know, people like
It has to work.
Microsoft and Amazon.
But a fixed infrastructure that doesn't allow you to do the types of
Or gives you an opinion
incremental
of how frameworks should
capabilities.
be.
That's
Exactly.
That's table stakes. That's
Yeah.
of course.
Well, and I think that was the point that some of our IT execs on yesterday's Enterprise Summit brought up. They went to the cloud, they pulled it back because, I mean, they were using software as a service and it wasn't customizable to their needs because they outgrew it and it wasn't scalable, so they had to pull it back in.
Yeah,
Now-
you often have to modify your processes to fit, right? The cloud vendor, which is opposite of what you used to do in the past.
Exactly.
Of lean on your vendor to modify their customize, right?
But,
But you look at segmentation also, truly, we need to look at where the opportunity and the value today exists. Going back to your comments, Hughes, I truly believe, and that we see today, right, 50% of our service revenue today, 50% comes from mid-market enterprise companies. And that used to be 42% a year ago, and we've grown revenues 25% year over year. So that component is the fastest growing component in communications today. So the sweet spot tends to be around maybe a couple hundred to 1,000 employees. That's a sweet spot. They're not truly large enterprise with a high level of complexity or integration. They're not SMB, but they tend to have locations in multiple parts of the world, right? It could be a US company with a facility in Australia, in the UK, and they want to standardize because they want to provide a common experience across all the users with contact center, with analytics, and with unified communication. I agree on the large enterprises, it's going to take longer because of the high level of customization. They might have a number of special applications built on top of infrastructure. That will take longer. But even that segment, the 1,000 plus, is growing at 40% year over year.
But it's true, but with all due respect, that's a very UCaaS-centered viewpoint, right? So I think some of the points we're trying to make is that the cloud isn't just about a seat of unified communications, right? The cloud is about exactly breaking down these services into a way that they're consumable to serve your business, right? To serve whatever your business process is, to serve your customer better, you know, the Uber apps and things like that. So our reach in these cloud services goes well beyond the knowledge worker, right? It's how you reach out to your business community, how you collaborate with your customer, right?
Yeah, and to the point, I think the thing with standardization is really important for all of your employees within your company have a standard experience.
That's right.
But if you deliver a standardization experience across all the companies in your market, you'll not be differentiated at all.
Exactly.
And that's the problem with SaaS, is that you force one opinion of what that standard should be to everybody in the market, taking away a business's ability to customize unique workflows and standard workflows within their environment. And that's where the building blocks for communication.
I'm not sure.
So they come
That's
together,
assuming
right?
that say you built something on the Office 365 stack. That does not in any way dictate how your mobile app, which to be honest is the only app that matters, that doesn't dictate what your mobile app does. That doesn't dictate what IP you put into that. Is what it does do is free you from creating all of the, frankly, commodity pieces that you would have previously created. You know, these frameworks are not as that restrictive. You can create great apps, and in fact, there are wonderful apps built on all sorts of different frameworks. Your point, though, is super important. It's not about just hosting your PBX. It's about the entire collaboration suite, the entire suite of services, you know, which could even extend into your data services, such as, you know, whatever your database is, your SQL database or whatever, all being part of the SaaS solution.
That's right.
So that you're not bolting these things together with duct tape and chewing gum.
That's right.
So
And you have to provide that level of integration to allow people to build on top.
That's
Well, to
business value.
customize, but not to have a custom application. I mean, that's really the difference of the past, where people got so tied into a highly customized application that was unique to that business. And that, I think, is probably the biggest reason where I would disagree with you. Larger companies do want to move right now because they're stuck in some of those very expensive, complex relationships where they have no flexibility to change their business processes because the technology is holding them hostage.
Look, the core PBX functionality is important, right? You have to communicate, you have to connect, just like we always have. But the real important part of the software now is to be able to coexist with the mission of the business, with the business application, and then extend from there, right? So when you're looking at your platforms, make sure that that's what you're viewing.
So I want to play off that because that's a really important point. Because one of the things we all need to do is change the way we procure this stuff as well. Because too often we sit here and try to do a like-for-like comparison. Well, what would it cost for me to take this black phone and turn it into a soft phone or some sort of other functionality? And the real innovation doesn't happen by just taking what we used to do and moving it to the cloud. The real innovation happens by doing all the things we just talked about. I'll give you another real-life example about how we're taking IoT data, right, and doing some of the things that your company is capable of. So we've got another demo in our booth that shows a water main break where we have an IoT device on a water main. That IoT device will send back some information to the company's communication platform, and that immediately will launch notification services out to any particular people within the area or something like that. So you could take that same premise and say, when I get information from an IoT device, how can I act on it? How can I set up a net meeting or a conference bridge or triage across that? So it's taking the communication and impacting the business process with some of the other components of the network. So you're really driving.
You make two good points there, Frank. One is the simple business, right? Going month to month, not having any minimums, not forcing people to pay for scale up. That's one point. And the IoT, I think, is really important because when you move to billions of notifications,
that's right,
you've got to have hyperscale.
Think of the analytics.
We can't build that as application vendors. We got to go to platform partners like Amazon or Microsoft or Google who really have that hyperscale capability to be able to satisfy those kinds of processes.
So, but the point of the comment was your ROI calculations break down. Because this concept of having a PBX on site and sweating that asset, you'll never be able to convince your business unit.
I don't believe the argument to cloud should be cost related, though. I think there's too many variables. I think it's the wrong reason. In fact, I don't think in any really IT process cost should ever be the deciding factor, because if you really want to lower your costs, squeeze your vendor.
Well, but remember, the economics of Cloud 2.0 versus old
give me a big
cloud
hug?
is a real economic difference, right? Because if I got to build hardware, software infrastructure to host my app as a cloud service, that's expensive. Because you've seen, what has Amazon reduced prices 59 times
as a cloud
in the last
provider,
year?
if you can't articulate the value in terms of agility and speed of development,
Agreed,
things like that,
but if you can do that at 30-40% less cost and keep the same margin from our side, then it's a lower cost to consume.
Our customers have gained here. All the risk of the deployment is now fallen on us as service providers. Okay, so how often have you all built infrastructure that hasn't been used? It happens all the time. Right, so now we've taken on. It's used quite a bit, actually. 100 million users. So now all that risk is put on us to build this and integrate it, right? So you don't have to do that. It allows you to be flexible and agile.
The 7,000 people company was mentioned earlier. They went to cloud for the right reasons. It was a merger of two companies, very complex, a lot of PBX system from traditional systems. They couldn't just deal with the level of complexity. One of the side benefits of moving to cloud was a 50% reduction in actual communications cost. Actual cash out of the company, 50% reduction. So it does matter. And that's actually that justifying moving to a cloud communication solution because we need to invest into the solution on a global basis. So the ROI is very important. To IT organization, it's going to be very important.
Yeah, of course there's a cost benefit. I think the point is that the risk is not worth the cost benefit. It's really the end outcome that matters way more.
See, I think the risk of staying, not moving to cloud actually is greater than whatever cost elements there. In fact, the example you gave with United is a good one because that drives me crazy with that stupid app. Other than that, it's a pretty good app. But let's say down the road they want to be able to interface messaging really quick.
Yep.
Do they want to go build that all themselves?
No.
Or can they simply just go grab a cloud widget, drop it in?
Absolutely, and that's where integration, and open APIs and open source software really becomes important, because if we didn't all build on the same standard infrastructure, we couldn't integrate cloud to cloud.
Another example here to the United one, but different one, Nordstrom. They've just recently implemented this application where salespeople inside a store can now use the mobile app they use for everything to actually communicate with their customers using text messaging. So the customer on the other end just gets text messaging. But that communication building block that they have of messaging is integrated with their e-commerce system. So a customer can reply back and say, oh, I want that piece of merchandise that you just sent me a picture of, and they can trigger a workflow. That's the level of integration that makes sense for that salespeople. Giving them another type of system, another interface, another type of integration is what things break. Right? And
this is the challenge, I think, for especially the UCaaS vendors on this panel, is the use cases you give, and I appreciate Enzo, it probably was cheaper, but ultimately, the company, after they shift your platform, should be able to do something they couldn't do before.
That's exactly right.
Right, when living on their, trying to do everything themselves. And that to me is where the real long-term value is. And maybe it might cost you a little more, a little bit less, but ultimately, that's a small cost of doing business when you think about the long-term competitive advantage.
And I go back to the mobile device, right? Because there's more and more use cases when you look at field force automation and the way you can actually communication enable a lot of these applications. I was just talking to a retailer the other day that, I think the name of the app was Storefront or something like that. They live and breathe on their, I don't know if it was an iPad or a mobile device, but that's what they live in, right? So how do you take that and make it much more valuable to them, right? With all the other things we can do with notification service, as well as application integration and things like that.
Well, your future point really hits home, because your United example, you shouldn't have to call United. They should know your needs. They should tell you exactly what you need and deliver that to you. You can only do that if you have all the analytics and AI, machine learning.
but the call center is not going anywhere. It's going to be here forever.
Yeah.
The question is,
the
what
routing of
intelligence
the
do you provide to the call
interaction,
center?
the integrated routing of the interaction and holding the interaction, related details, that is going to be there, and that's important, and that's hard to do because there's a lot of complexity in the application infrastructure to be able to manage that.
There's silos, right? Different apps, and they have to be connected.
Well, this is really where it's going to go, isn't it? The call center is going to evolve. It's not just a case of connecting a phone line to a mobile app. I mean, the idea that, of course, it should be super easy. Every application should have effectively its own phone line. You shouldn't, page out to the dialer and all of that. That's not where the innovation is. I mean, that's so old. It's really going to be in the back end where the business processes are tied together, where it's super easy for the call center representative, who, after a period of time, isn't even going to be a human. It's going to be an agent, or it's going to be software that is going to respond to the needs.
That's right.
It's going to know that, for instance, when I miss the flight, I hope I don't miss the flight this evening, but when I miss the flight, it's going to ping me and say, okay, we missed the flight.
We've rebooked you on another flight. Here's your boarding pass. Go to gate 3 instead of gate 8 where you were headed originally.
And it shouldn't have to wait till you miss that flight. It should know that you're 45 minutes from the airport, you're going to miss that flight.
Or that it's me and I'm always late. Always trying to get through TSA right at the last minute. Yeah, absolutely. It should be looking at our behaviors. And this is where you really need to have, to join all those data silos together, have the intelligence over it, and have the business workflow across the entire application that allows you to build the next generation call center or the next generation, whatever it is you guys want to build.
And I agree with Andrew also. Think about things like quality management, right? Quality management is an application that's been used in contact center, right? It's a very powerful application, but doesn't need to be available just in a contact center. You can now take the same capability and make it available horizontally to a sales function, to a help desk function, so we can actually become a coaching tool, a training tool for people outside of a contact center. So that's, I think, the level of integration and business integration we need to create to truly enable a high level of productivity.
So there's a great question on the monitor, if it's okay if I read it real quick. It says, why, from Twitter, why are we referencing our kids to demonstrate understanding of the future and all these pounds and stuff? And aren't we adopting too? Why aren't we adopting too? So I made the reference. So here's my kind of 2 cents on that, right? I say that is because when you look at communications that are happening in the retail space, it's happening because it's changing people's lives. When I look at my 75-year-old mother that uses Facebook, or my 12-year-old son that uses his iPhone and iPad, it's because it's important to him. It makes a difference in the way he interacts with his friends. We don't spend enough time changing the way we work. So there's lots of opportunities for us. We talk a lot about business process innovation. If we start from the business process and work backwards, the application will be much more meaningful for us. And this concept of adoption, which drives me crazy, you can't sell adoption services after you deploy a technology. The adoption happens if you make the technology that you're deploying meaningful for the end user, the concept of the end user experience. They will want to adopt it. It will become rampant. You won't be able to stop it.
And end users are cynical, right? They're cynical that this is one more interface that you are giving me to use something that I can do other ways as well. So embedding that communication experience, you still need the infrastructure and the integration, but embedding that experience into software that we already use today is the better one.
Bingo.
Well, you let the user choose. And at the end of the day, you should be able to choose what you want to communicate, how you want to communicate it, on what device. And, the whole notion of millennials is past. The over 65 are actually more likely to text than use a phone today. Yeah. So, I mean, the whole notion of digital native, it's pervasive. It's like you said, you're waiting for the cloud. It's already here. Let's get on with it. Let's talk about how we can really impact business process and drive value.
Exactly.
Well, gentlemen, on that note, I think that's a good note to end on. I want to thank you all for participating in this lively discussion. I hope our audience enjoyed it.